The hum of computers and the clatter of keyboards filled the air at Brenton and Company, a thriving marketing firm in the heart of the city. The office was a blend of sleek modern design and high-pressure energy, where employees hustled to meet deadlines and secure the next big deal. Among them was Keisha Walker, a talented account manager in her early 30s. Keisha was known for her sharp mind and relentless work ethic. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her tailored blouses and neatly braided hair always immaculate. Her work spoke for itself. Clients loved her creative ideas, and her campaigns consistently brought in impressive results. But despite her achievements, Keisha often felt like an outsider in the corporate world she had worked so hard to enter. At the top of the corporate hierarchy was Andrew Brenton, the firm's CEO and founder. Andrew, a middle-aged man with a penchant for expensive suits and condescending smirks, ruled the office with an iron fist. To him, employees were assets, useful until they weren't. And while he prided himself on his company's success, his leadership was laced with biases that were impossible to ignore. Keisha had always been careful around Andrew, choosing her words wisely and keeping her head down. But her exceptional performance had started to attract attention, and not all of it was positive. In recent weeks, Andrew had begun scrutinizing her work more closely, nitpicking over trivial details, and making offhand comments that stung more than she let on. One morning, as Keisha prepared for a presentation that could secure the firm's biggest client yet, Andrew called her into his office. The space was cold and imposing, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a sweeping view of the city skyline. Andrew sat behind a massive mahogany desk, his expression unreadable. "Keisha," he began. His tone clipped. "We need to talk about your role here." Her heart sank. She had heard those words before, and they rarely led to anything good. Andrew continued, his voice laced with a thinly veiled condescension. "Your recent performance has been underwhelming, and I've decided it's time for a change." Keisha's stomach churned as his words sank in. She had poured her heart into her work, exceeding expectations at every turn. Yet here she was, being dismissed without a second thought. Effective immediately, Andrew added, "You're no longer employed at Brenton and Company. HR will handle the formalities." Keisha stood there, stunned. She wanted to protest, to point to her accomplishments and demand an explanation. But Andrew's expression made it clear he wasn't interested in a conversation. To him, she was just another employee, disposable and replaceable. As she walked out of his office, the whispers started. Colleagues exchanged glances, some sympathetic, others indifferent. Keisha felt the weight of their stares, but she held her head high, her mind racing with emotions. Anger, frustration, and a spark of determination she hadn't felt in years. What Andrew didn't realize was that this wasn't the end of Keisha's story. It was just the beginning of a comeback that would leave him speechless. Keisha left Brenton and Company with her box of belongings cradled in her arms. The city's bustle a stark contrast to the quiet storm brewing inside her. She had given so much to her job, and now she found herself on the outside, dismissed without reason or recourse. Her frustration was palpable, but beneath it was a seed of determination she hadn't fully realized yet. She walked aimlessly through the crowded streets until she reached a small cafe she used to visit during her college days. The warm smell of coffee and pastries wafted through the air as she stepped inside. The place hadn't changed much. A few new faces behind the counter, but the same cozy, welcoming vibe. She ordered a latte and found a seat by the window, staring out at the rush of people. As she sipped her coffee, lost in thought, a familiar voice pulled her from her reverie. "Well, if it isn't Keisha Walker. Haven't seen you in ages." Keisha turned to see Mr. Howard, her former business professor, smiling warmly at her. He was in his late 60s, with silver hair and a slightly hunched posture, but his eyes sparkled with energy and wisdom. He held a newspaper under one arm and a cup of tea in the other. "Mr. Howard," Keisha exclaimed, her surprise turning into genuine relief. She motioned for him to join her. He slid into the seat across from her, setting his tea down carefully. "How's my star pupil? You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Keisha sighed, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. I just got fired. Out of the blue. After years of hard work and results. They just tossed me aside. Mr. Howard nodded, his expression thoughtful. Let me guess. Someone at the top couldn't see past their own biases? Keisha blinked, startled by his perceptiveness. How did you? I've seen it before, he said gently. And I know it hurts. But Keisha, you're stronger than this. You've always been resourceful, determined, and brilliant. Losing this job isn't the end. It's a chance to start something better. As they talked, Mr. Howard shared stories of his own struggles early in his career, times when he had faced unfair treatment and doubted himself. His words were laced with encouragement, but also practicality. You have a gift, Keisha, he said, leaning forward. Your ideas, your creativity, they're valuable. Why not use them for yourself? Keisha frowned, unsure. You mean start my own business? I wouldn't even know where to begin. That's what I'm here for, Mr. Howard replied with a grin. I still keep in touch with some of my old students, many of whom are running successful companies now. With your talent and their connections, I think we can build something incredible. His confidence in her was infectious. For the first time since walking out of Brenton and Company, Keisha felt a spark of hope. She wasn't alone in this fight, and she wasn't without options. Okay, she said slowly, her resolve hardening. Let's do it. Mr. Howard raised his cup in a mock toast. That's the Keisha I remember. Let's show them what they lost. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Howard became her mentor and guide, helping her draft business plans and connect with his network. Together, they crafted a vision for a boutique marketing agency that prioritized creativity, diversity, and authenticity. Everything Brenton and Company lacked. Keisha's interactions with Mr. Howard were a stark contrast to her experience with Andrew Brenton. Where Andrew had dismissed her potential, Mr. Howard amplified it. His belief in her abilities reminded her of the confidence she once had, pushing her to reclaim it. As they worked late into the evenings, surrounded by stacks of papers and the glow of a laptop screen, Keisha found herself transforming. The pain of her firing was still there, but it had become fuel, a drive to prove that her worth was far greater than one man's narrow perception. As Keisha delved into building her own marketing agency with Mr. Howard's guidance, she found herself navigating uncharted waters. The excitement of starting fresh was quickly tempered by the reality of the challenges ahead. Late nights turned into early mornings, and the weight of uncertainty often lingered in her mind. Internally, Keisha wrestled with conflicting emotions. A part of her still felt the sting of being fired, an unjust dismissal that seemed to undermine her years of hard work. Pride urged her to succeed, to prove to Andrew Brenton and everyone at her old company that she was worth far more than they had ever realized. But alongside that pride was a nagging guilt. Was her drive to succeed fueled by a desire for revenge? And if so, would it diminish the value of what she was building? One evening, as she stared at her laptop screen, an email from a potential client sat unopened. The client was a mid-sized tech company interested in her services, a critical opportunity for her fledgling business. But the email also reminded her of the looming competition, established firms like Brenton and Company, which dominated the industry. Would clients take her seriously? Could she compete with the resources and reputation of firms like Andrews? Keisha's doubts began to creep in. She closed her laptop with a sigh and leaned back in her chair, her thoughts racing. She felt a deep sense of gratitude toward Mr. Howard for believing in her and opening doors she wouldn't have been able to access on her own. But she also felt the weight of that belief, an unspoken expectation that she wouldn't let him down. Her doubts surfaced during a late-night brainstorming session with Mr. Howard. As he sketched out ideas on a whiteboard, his energy infectious, Keisha finally voiced her concerns. Mr. Howard, she began hesitantly, what if this doesn't work? What if I fail? He paused, turning to face her. Why do you think you'll fail, Keisha? She hesitated, her voice quieter. Because I'm not like them. I don't have their resources, their connections, their reputation. And let's be honest, I was fired. Doesn't that say something about me? Mr. Howard set down his marker and walked over, his expression gentle but firm. Keisha, you were fired because someone couldn't see your worth, not because you didn't have it. There's a difference. And as for resources and reputation, those things come with time. What you have right now is something far more valuable. Your talent, your integrity, and the drive to make this work. But what if it's not enough? She pressed, her voice betraying the vulnerability she rarely showed. Mr. Howard gave her a knowing smile. It's not about being perfect, Keisha. It's about showing up every single day and doing the work. The people who succeed aren't the ones who have everything handed to them. They're the ones who refuse to give up, even when it's hard. Keisha's internal struggle wasn't the only challenge she faced. Externally, she encountered resistance from prospective clients who hesitated to take a chance on a new agency. Some meetings ended with polite rejections, while others didn't even offer a follow-up. She could see the skepticism in their eyes when they realized she wasn't backed by a large team or a glossy portfolio. One particularly difficult meeting left her feeling defeated. After pitching to a potential client for nearly an hour, she was met with a curt response. You're talented, but we need someone with a proven track record. Maybe in a few years we can revisit. Walking out of the office, Keisha felt the familiar sting of dismissal. It reminded her of Andrew's condescending tone and the way he had underestimated her. But instead of letting the rejection break her, she felt a flicker of determination reignite. These challenges weren't just obstacles, they were opportunities to grow stronger. That night, Keisha sat at her kitchen table, reviewing her notes from the meeting. Her thoughts drifted to the people who had supported her. Mr. Howard, who saw her potential when others didn't. Her family, who cheered her on from the sidelines. And even the small but growing group of clients who had trusted her with their projects. They believed in her, and it was time she fully believed in herself. She reopened her laptop, staring at the email from the tech company. This time, she clicked on it. The client had requested a follow-up proposal, and while it wasn't a guarantee, it was a chance. One she wasn't going to waste. Keisha took a deep breath and began typing, her doubts slowly giving way to a renewed sense of purpose. She didn't need to be like Brenton and company. She needed to be herself, authentic, creative, and unrelenting in her pursuit of success. By the end of the night, Keisha had submitted her proposal. As she closed her laptop, a small smile played on her lips. She wasn't just building a business. She was building something that reflected her values, her vision, and her resilience. The journey was far from over, but Keisha realized that the challenges she faced weren't signs of failure. They were stepping stones to something greater. And with every rejection, every hurdle, she was one step closer to proving not just to Andrew but to herself that she was capable of far more than anyone had ever imagined. Keisha's proposal to the tech company marked a turning point in her journey. A week later, she received an email that began with the words, "We're impressed by your vision and would like to move forward with your agency." She stared at the screen, rereading the message as a rush of emotions. Relief, pride, and excitement washed over her. It wasn't just about landing the client. It was about validation. She had something unique to offer, and people were starting to notice. The contract with the tech company gave her agency the momentum it needed. Word of her innovative approach spread, and soon other clients began reaching out. Keisha's days became a whirlwind of meetings, strategy sessions, and creative brainstorming. She assembled a small team of like-minded professionals, many of whom had faced similar struggles in their own careers. Together, they created a culture that valued authenticity, diversity, and collaboration. Everything Brenton and company had lacked. One evening, as Keisha wrapped up another productive day, she received a phone call from Mr. Howard. His voice was warm, filled with pride. "Keisha, I hear you're making waves. Your name's starting to pop up in some impressive circles." Keisha laughed lightly, leaning back in her chair. "Thanks to you, Mr. Howard. I couldn't have done this without your guidance." "Nonsense," he replied. "You had the talent and determination all along. I just helped you see it." His words struck a chord. Keisha realized how much his belief in her had shaped her journey. She owed him more than gratitude. She owed him a tangible way to show how his mentorship had transformed her life. Weeks later, Keisha invited Mr. Howard to the grand opening of her agency's new office. The space was modest but thoughtfully designed, reflecting the values she had built her business on. When Mr. Howard arrived, he was greeted by a room buzzing with energy. Clients, team members, and supporters who had become part of Keisha's growing community. As Keisha introduced him to the team, she spoke with heartfelt sincerity. "This man is the reason I'm standing here today. When I doubted myself, he reminded me of my worth. When I faced challenges, he gave me the tools to overcome them. Everything we've built here started with his belief in me." The room erupted in applause, and Mr. Howard's eyes glistened with emotion. "Keisha," he said, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat, "this is all you. I may have given you a push, but you're the one who turned it into something incredible." Keisha's success didn't go unnoticed by the corporate world, and soon enough, Brenton and company found themselves facing unexpected competition. One of their long-standing clients, a luxury brand, approached Keisha's agency, impressed by her innovative campaigns. It was a major opportunity, but also a chance to cross paths with Andrew Brenton once more. During the pitch meeting, Keisha presented her ideas with confidence and poise. Andrew, seated across the table, barely masked his surprise when he realized who she was. The last time they had met, he had dismissed her as irrelevant. Now she was a formidable competitor, commanding the attention of the room. After the meeting, Andrew approached her, his tone forced but cordial. "Keisha, I must admit, I didn't expect to see you here." Keisha smiled politely, her gaze unwavering. "Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" Andrew hesitated, then extended a hand. "Well, congratulations on what you've built." "Impressive." Keisha shook his hand, her grip firm. "Thank you, Andrew. I've always believed that challenges are just opportunities in disguise." Her words lingered, carrying a weight that Andrew couldn't ignore. For the first time, he looked genuinely unsettled, not because of her success, but because of the realization that he had underestimated someone who had outgrown his narrow view. As Keisha left the meeting, she felt a sense of closure. She hadn't just proven Andrew wrong. She had proven herself right. Her journey wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming her power and creating something meaningful. In the months that followed, Keisha continued to grow her agency, but she never forgot the lessons she had learned along the way. She started a mentorship program, inspired by Mr. Howard's impact on her life. The program focused on supporting young professionals, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds, helping them navigate the challenges of the corporate world. One evening, as she prepared to leave the office, a young intern approached her. "Ms. Walker," the intern said shyly, "I just wanted to thank you. Working here has shown me what's possible, and it's made me believe I can achieve more than I ever thought." Keisha smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "You can and you will. Just remember, your worth isn't determined by anyone else. It's something you define for yourself." As the intern left, Keisha glanced around her office, the walls adorned with campaign posters and team photos. She thought about how far she had come, from the humiliation of being fired to the triumph of building something that truly mattered. Her journey wasn't just about overcoming adversity. It was about creating a legacy of empowerment and resilience. And as she locked the door and stepped into the night, she knew one thing for certain. Success wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving herself right. The hum of the city lights filled the evening air as Keisha stood on the balcony of her office, gazing out at the skyline. The journey that had begun with frustration and rejection now felt like a distant memory, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment and purpose. She thought back to the day she was fired, the condescending tone in Andrew Brenton's voice, the whispers of her colleagues, and the overwhelming feeling of being discarded. At the time, it felt like the end. But now she realized it had been a beginning. That moment, painful as it was, had pushed her to reclaim her power and redefine her future. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Howard. "Proud of you as always. Keep shining, Keisha." She smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude for the mentor who had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. She turned back inside, her office brimming with life and creativity. Her team was small but dedicated, their energy infectious. They weren't just building campaigns, they were building a culture of inclusivity and authenticity, a place where every voice mattered. Keisha's thoughts were interrupted as one of her team members approached, holding a framed certificate. "We thought you should have this," they said with a grin. She took the frame and read the inscription. "For creating a space where creativity thrives and people grow." Her eyes misted, and she looked up at her team, who had gathered around her with proud smiles. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "But this isn't just my achievement. It's ours. Together, we've built something that goes beyond business. We've built something meaningful." As the team dispersed, Keisha took a moment to herself. She knew the path ahead would still have challenges, but she also knew she was ready to face them. Her experience had taught her that rejection didn't define her worth, resilience did. And when you combined resilience with purpose, you could create something extraordinary. The lesson was clear. Success wasn't just about overcoming obstacles. It was about using those obstacles to build something greater, something that inspired and uplifted others. And as Keisha stepped back inside to join her team, she felt a deep sense of peace. She wasn't just succeeding. She was thriving, and she was helping others thrive too. Because true success, she realized, was never just about the destination. It was about the journey, the people who walked it with you, and the legacy you left behind.